The hum of the research lab was deafening, but Zora could barely hear it over the sound of her own heartbeat. Her body was shaking, not from fear, but from something far more strange. Something that shouldn't have been happening. She had always been different from the humans she lived with, even among the other aliens. But today, something was off. She could feel it deep inside her, a tingling sensation that started in her chest and radiated outward. At first, it was just a faint ripple, like a breeze on a hot summer day. But now, it felt like something more, something uncontrollable. Her face flushed with heat, and she clenched her fists to steady herself. She tried to focus on the machines around her, the same ones she had been studying for months. The blinking lights, the soft whirring of the technology, the hum of the advanced alien devices, all of it should have been familiar. But today, it was as if she were in a different world. Zora took a deep breath, glancing down at the shimmering alien device strapped to her arm. The device was supposed to help regulate her energy, something every alien needed in a foreign atmosphere. But today, it felt like the device was useless. Her body wasn't responding the way it should. The sensations were only growing stronger. "Zora?" A voice from the doorway broke her thoughts. Dr. Goran, the human scientist who had been assigned to work with her, stepped into the lab. He was tall, wiry, with glasses perched on the edge of his nose, always looking as if he had been awake for days. Today, he looked more curious than concerned, though there was an unmistakable glint of worry in his eyes. Zora opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, her vision blurred, and the strange sensation intensified. Her body felt alien to her, like it was no longer under her control. Her breathing quickened, and she took a half-step back, her mind racing to understand what was happening. "What's wrong?" Dr. Goran asked, stepping closer. He reached out, but before he could touch her, Zora collapsed to her knees. A sharp gasp escaped her lips as she felt a surge of energy flood through her veins, an uncontrollable force that made her entire body tremble. "Zora!" Goran's voice echoed through the lab, and he was at her side in an instant. "Zora, talk to me. What's happening?" But Zora couldn't respond. She could only feel it, the transformation. It wasn't like anything she had experienced before. Her hands trembled as she pressed them to her cheeks, feeling the heat that radiated from her skin. Her breathing became shallow and she tried to steady herself, but the energy inside her was unstoppable. It felt like a storm raging in her chest, threatening to tear her apart. And then, without warning, something shifted inside her. She felt it, a strange and sudden change in her body. The tingling sensation turned into a rush of heat, and she gasped, her fingers involuntarily gripping the edge of the table in front of her. "Dr. Goran, something's happening. I can't control it." Her voice was barely a whisper. Dr. Goran's expression flickered from concern to confusion. He had seen Zora undergo countless tests designed to help her adjust to the atmosphere, to regulate her energy levels, but nothing like this. This was different. This was new, and it wasn't part of the plan. "Stay calm, Zora. I'll get the medics." But before he could finish, Zora's body convulsed. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, and she felt a pressure building, as if her very cells were expanding in ways they weren't supposed to. The sensation was so overwhelming that she thought she might scream, but no sound escaped her lips. She could feel her body changing, stretching, as though it were breaking apart and reassembling. The world around her spun, and she clenched her eyes shut, trying to block out the wave of dizziness that hit her. Her body felt hot, too hot. Sweat beaded on her skin, and she could feel the dampness soaking through her clothes. It wasn't just discomfort, it was pain, sharp and biting. When she opened her eyes again, something was different. The lights in the lab flickered, casting long shadows across the floor. The air smelled of something strange, like ozone and burning metal, but it wasn't just the atmosphere. It was her. Zora glanced down at her chest, and her breath caught in her throat. Her coconuts. They were swelling. Her mind went into a frenzy as she tried to process what was happening. She wasn't imagining it. Her chest was growing, expanding, as if it were being stretched beyond its limits. It wasn't just her body. It was as if her very essence was being altered, changed. The alien physiology she had known for so long was being rewritten piece by piece. Heat rushed to her face, and she felt her cheeks burn with the sudden embarrassment. The human term for her chest, coconuts, seemed so trivial now, but the swelling, the uncontrollable change, was anything but. Dr. Goran. Zora gasped, reaching out to him, but her words were muffled by the strange tightness in her chest. This is... The human scientist looked horrified, his eyes wide with disbelief. He took a step back, his mouth opening and closing, as if he were struggling to find the right words. I don't understand, he stammered. How is this possible? What's happening to you? Zora couldn't answer. Her body was betraying her, changing in ways she couldn't comprehend. It was as though the very core of her being had been cracked open and reformed, and now she was trapped in a shell she didn't recognize. The transformation wasn't stopping. Her body continued to grow and shift until she thought she might collapse from the sheer pressure. The energy within her seemed to be feeding off her confusion, feeding off the panic that was rising inside her, and then, as suddenly as it had started, the changes stopped. Zora collapsed backward, her hands clutching the table behind her for support. The world around her was spinning, and she could barely hold herself up. Her chest, still swollen and aching, felt foreign to her. Her skin still tingled, but the intensity had dimmed, leaving only a dull hum of energy deep within her. Dr. Goran remained frozen, staring at her. His expression had gone from confusion to something far more unsettling. Fear. For the first time, since Zora had met him, she could see the cracks in his composure. The mask had slipped, and beneath it was something far darker. Zora, his voice was barely a whisper. What have they done to you? Zora's mind reeled. She didn't know what he meant. Who had done this to her? What was happening? The transformation had been so sudden, so unexpected. She had no answers, only questions, but one thing was clear. Whatever had just happened to her, it wasn't natural. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that it had been set in motion long before she had stepped into this lab. Whoever had orchestrated this, whatever this was far beyond anything she could have ever imagined, and they were watching her. They were waiting for her. The storm inside her chest began to stir again, but this time she was ready. Her journey was only just beginning. The sterile, cold walls of the research lab closed in around Zora. She sat on the metal examination table, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to steady herself. The sensation in her chest had subsided somewhat, but the tingling still lingered, a constant reminder of the unexplainable transformation she had just undergone. Dr. Goran, who had remained eerily quiet since her collapse, was standing at the far end of the room, his back to her. He was hunched over a terminal, typing furiously, his brow furrowed in concentration. The flickering lights above cast long, ominous shadows across the walls, but Zora could barely notice them. Her mind was racing with questions that gnawed at her like a relentless itch. What had just happened? Why had her body changed like that? And why had it felt so unnatural? Zora swallowed hard, her throat dry. She wasn't sure what terrified her more, the sensation of losing control over her own body, or the growing suspicion that she was a pawn in some game she couldn't even begin to understand. "Dr. Goran!" she called out, her voice strained, but the scientist didn't react. His focus was entirely on the screen before him. Frustrated, Zora swung her legs over the edge of the table, her bare feet making contact with the cold metal floor. She stood up slowly, testing her legs to ensure they still worked properly. She had to confront him. She couldn't wait any longer. "What's going on, Goran?" she demanded, her voice firm, though she could hear the underlying tremor. "What was that? What did you do to me?" Goran didn't look at her. He continued typing, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the screen. For a long moment, there was only the sound of his fingers moving across the keyboard, and Zora's heart pounded in her chest. Finally, he spoke, but his words were barely audible, as if he were trying to convince himself as much as he was trying to answer her. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We didn't anticipate such a drastic reaction. But the signs were there. We should have seen it coming." Zora felt a chill crawl up her spine. "What signs? What are you talking about?" Goran's shoulders stiffened, and he let out a long, ragged sigh. Slowly he turned to face her, his eyes avoiding hers. When he spoke again, his tone was softer, almost apologetic, but it didn't do anything to soothe Zora's growing unease. "There are things you don't know about, Zora, things we didn't want you to know. But now it's too late." Zora's heart skipped a beat. "Too late for what?" Goran seemed to hesitate before answering. His voice was barely a whisper, as if he feared someone might overhear. "Your transformation. It wasn't natural. It wasn't just a result of your exposure to our atmosphere or the experiments we conducted. This is something more." Zora took a step forward, her fists clenched at her sides. "What are you talking about? I don't understand. You said you were studying my physiology to help me adjust, to help me live. Yeah, but this isn't just some experiment. You're hiding something. You're not telling me the full truth." Goran closed his eyes, as if preparing himself to reveal something he had been avoiding. "I never wanted you to find out, Zora, but the truth is, your species, your true heritage, it's much more complex than we originally believed. What you're experiencing, it's part of a much larger plan, a plan that's been in motion long before you arrived on Earth." Zora's mind reeled. She took another step toward him. "What plan? And why am I a part of it?" Goran's eyes finally met hers, and for the first time, Zora saw a flicker of something she hadn't expected. Fear. Not for himself, but for her. "You've always been part of it," he said quietly. "From the moment we discovered your species. We knew you would play a pivotal role in the future of not just your people, but of all life in this galaxy. Your transformation is only the beginning, and it's happening faster than we anticipated." Zora could barely comprehend what he was saying. "What are you talking about? I'm not some experiment. I'm not a weapon or a tool for your plan. I'm an individual." Goran's eyes softened, but his voice remained steady. "I never said you were just an experiment, but you're also not just an individual. You're connected to something far bigger than yourself, something far older. And now the change has begun. You're awakening, Zora." "Awakening?" she repeated, her voice a mixture of disbelief and confusion. "What does that mean? And why do you keep talking about change? What kind of change?" Goran glanced at the terminal again, his fingers hovering over the keys. "It means you're becoming something more than what you were. You're unlocking abilities that have been dormant in your species for millennia, and I'm afraid you're not the only one." Zora's mind spun. Her heart raced as she tried to process his words. "Wait, you mean there are others like me? Others who are changing?" "Yes," Goran replied softly. "And they're not just from Earth. Some of them are already here, hiding among us, waiting for the right moment. And some of them may have been here longer than we realize. They've been trying to influence humanity for centuries, manipulating us for their own ends." "Who are they?" Zora asked, her voice low, but filled with an undeniable sense of urgency. Goran hesitated again, but this time he didn't look away. "The organization, the ones who have been monitoring your species for decades. They've been waiting for you to awaken, to fully evolve. You are the key to their plan. Zora felt a wave of nausea rise in her chest. What plan? What do they want from me? Goran's expression grew darker. They want to harness your abilities. Your transformation is just the beginning, but they're not ready yet. They need time to study you, to figure out how to control the power that you and others like you now possess. And they won't stop until they have you under their control. For a moment, there was silence in the lab. Zora's mind raced, her pulse hammering in her ears. The weight of Goran's words hung heavily in the air. She wasn't just a subject in an experiment. She wasn't just a being trying to adapt to a new world. She was part of something much bigger, something dangerous. And now she had to figure out how to survive it. Is that why you betrayed me? Zora's voice was cold, her eyes narrowing. You've been working for them this whole time, haven't you? I never should have trusted you. Goran flinched, but he didn't deny it. Instead, he nodded slowly and reluctantly. I never wanted it to go this far, but I had no choice. They've been controlling everything for years, Zora. Everything you've learned, everything you've been told, it's all part of their plan. Zora's breath caught in her throat. Betrayal. It stung worse than any physical injury. She had trusted Goran. She had thought he was an ally, someone who understood her struggles and was trying to help. But now she realized everything had been a lie. She was just another pawn in a much larger game. I won't be part of this, Zora declared, her voice firm, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. I'll stop them. I'll stop you. Goran's eyes darkened with a mix of pity and warning. You don't understand, Zora. You can't stop it. It's already begun. The changes you're experiencing are just the start. You can't fight it. You don't even know what you're up against. I'll find a way, she said, her resolve hardening, and I'll make sure the truth comes out. Goran didn't reply. Instead, he simply turned away and walked to the terminal, his back to her once again. Zora could feel the tension in the air thickening, but she refused to let fear control her. She couldn't let him win. She couldn't let them win. Her journey had just begun, and the only thing she knew for certain was that she wouldn't stop until she uncovered the full truth. Zora barely slept that night. Her mind was consumed with the events of the past few hours, each revelation crashing into her consciousness like a wave of cold, unforgiving water. The lab was eerily silent, its walls pressing in on her with a heavy weight she couldn't shake off. It felt like every breath she took was stifled by the unknown forces that were closing in around her. The following morning, she found herself pacing in the sterile confines of the research facility's break room. Her thoughts swirled, her mind darting from one horrific realization to the next. Goran's words echoed in her mind. You're not just a subject in an experiment. You're part of something bigger, something dangerous. The more she thought about it, the more she felt like she was trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. She wasn't just an ordinary human woman. She was a key player in a game she didn't understand, controlled by shadowy forces she could barely comprehend. And the worst part, they were already manipulating her, using her transformation as part of their plan. The door to the break room opened, pulling Zora from her thoughts. She spun around, her eyes narrowing in anticipation. But it wasn't Goran who entered. Instead, a young woman, tall, athletic, with piercing green eyes, stepped inside. Zora recognized her immediately. Her name was Kira, and she was one of the few people Zora had trusted in the lab. Kira had been friendly, always offering a word of encouragement whenever Zora had doubts about her adjustment to the alien environment. But now, looking at her, Zora couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about her. Kira's expression was unreadable as she stepped into the room, closing the door behind her with an almost unnatural precision. She looked around for a moment before her gaze finally landed on Zora. "Zora," Kira said quietly, her voice soft, almost conspiratorial. "We need to talk." Zora's instincts immediately went on high alert. She hadn't expected anyone from the lab to approach her. After everything that had happened with Goran, she couldn't trust anyone. "What's going on, Kira?" Zora asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. "Are you here to try and convince me that this is all for the greater good?" Kira raised an eyebrow, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm here to warn you. You're not safe here. None of us are." Zora's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? I thought you were one of the few people I could trust in this place." Kira's expression darkened, her eyes flicking toward the door, as though to ensure no one was listening. "The truth is, Zora, we're all being watched, every single one of us. And the people who are watching us, they're not who they say they are." Zora's stomach twisted into a tight knot. She took a step closer to Kira, her voice low and urgent. "Who are they? What's going on here?" Kira hesitated, glancing over her shoulder before speaking again, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're a faction of the organization that's been tracking your species for centuries. They've been working in the shadows, manipulating events, orchestrating everything. They've infiltrated the highest levels of government, research institutions, even the media. They control everything, and they've been preparing for something." Zora felt a chill crawl up her spine. The magnitude of what Kira was suggesting was almost too much to process. "Preparing for what?" Zora asked, her throat dry. Kira leaned in, her voice dropping to a near inaudible whisper. "The awakening." Zora's mind raced. "The awakening? You mean what's happening to me? Is that what they want?" Kira nodded. "Yes, they want to control the transformation. They believe that by harnessing the abilities you and others like you are developing, they can shape the future of humanity. They think they can use you as a weapon." A cold shiver ran down Zora's spine. The transformation she had been going through, her growing abilities, the changes in her body, it was all part of their plan. She had known, on some level, that something wasn't right. But now, hearing it confirmed, the gravity of the situation hit her like a ton of bricks. "You're saying that they want to use me?" Zora's voice was trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "What makes them think they have the right to control me? To control us?" Kira stepped back, her face shadowed with regret. "I don't have all the answers, Zora, but I know this. You're not alone. There are others, like you, who are waking up to their true potential, and if we don't stop them, they'll use you and others like you to start a war that will reshape everything." Zora's mind reeled. A war. The thought of it was incomprehensible, but the more she thought about it, the more it started to make sense. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was tied to something far greater, something that had the potential to change the course of history. "They're already trying to find you," Kira continued, her voice strained with urgency. "They're monitoring your every move, trying to figure out how to control your abilities. They've been tracking everyone who has gone through the transformation, trying to figure out how to force it. And they won't stop until they have you." Zora's heart pounded in her chest. "What do I do? How do I stop them?" Kira glanced around the room again, her eyes wide with fear. "You can't do it alone, Zora, but there are others, people, who are on your side, people who have been fighting back against the organization. You need to find them." Zora's mind was racing. The weight of Kira's words hung heavy in the air. She wasn't just fighting for her own survival anymore. She was fighting for the future of humanity itself. "I don't know who to trust anymore," Zora whispered, her voice barely audible. Kira gave her a solemn look. "I know, but you'll have to take the risk. There's no other choice." The door to the break room suddenly slid open, and Zora spun around, her heart in her throat. She didn't need to turn to know that it was Goran. The familiar footsteps gave him away. "Zora," he said, his voice cold and controlled. "It's time." Zora turned back to Kira, but the woman was already gone. She had slipped out of the room as silently as she had entered, leaving Zora standing alone with the crushing weight of the secrets she had just learned. Goran stepped into the room, his eyes narrowing as he assessed Zora's expression. "Are you ready?" "Ready for what?" Zora asked, her voice hard. "You know what I'm talking about," Goran replied. "The next phase, the awakening." Zora's stomach churned. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she had no choice. She had to go through with it. She had to understand what was happening to her, and she had to find a way to stop it before it was too late. Zora stood in front of the sleek glass window that looked out onto the vast expanse of the research facility. It was night, and the sprawling complex of laboratories, corridors, and control rooms below her seemed to hum with life. The lights cast long shadows across the sterile floors, illuminating the emptiness of the place. Her reflection in the glass was a stark contrast to the woman she had been just weeks ago. She barely recognized the person staring back at her. Her transformation had accelerated in ways that even Goran hadn't fully anticipated. Her body felt stronger, her senses sharper, but with every passing day, the changes became more unpredictable. The strange alien energy coursing through her was no longer something she could ignore. It was alive, pulsing beneath her skin, and it seemed to be connected to everything around her. But what terrified her most was the fact that she no longer felt entirely human. She had been trying to deny it for as long as she could, but now it was undeniable. She was becoming something else, something beyond human. The door to the observation room slid open behind her with a soft hiss, and Zora turned to see Goran enter. His expression was unreadable, but she could see the tension in his posture. He knew something she didn't. "You've been avoiding me," Zora said, her voice laced with frustration. She had been doing everything she could to distance herself from Goran ever since their last conversation. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from her, something important. "I haven't been avoiding you," Goran replied, his tone calm but firm. "I've just been giving you space. You've been under a lot of pressure lately." Zora didn't buy it. "Pressure? Is that what you call it? Pressure?" She stepped closer to him, her fists clenched at her sides. "You've been hiding things from me, Goran. I can see it in your eyes. What aren't you telling me?" Goran's eyes hardened and he sighed heavily. "I wish I could explain everything to you, Zora, but I can't. Not yet." "Why?" Zora demanded. "Why can't you tell me the truth?" "Because the truth is dangerous," Goran said quietly. "You're already a part of something much bigger than you realize, and the longer you stay here, the more you'll get caught up in it." Zora's heart pounded in her chest. "Caught up in what? What are you talking about?" Goran hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "The organization, the ones who are behind all of this. They've been monitoring you from the very beginning. They know what you're capable of, and they intend to use you." Zora's mind raced as the words sank in. "Use me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "For what?" Goran's eyes darkened. "For the awakening. They want to control it. They want to harness your abilities and turn you into a weapon." A cold wave of dread washed over Zora as she processed his words. The awakening, the transformation that had begun within her. It wasn't just a biological change, it was a process they were controlling. She had been a pawn in their game from the start, and now they were ready to reap the rewards. "You're lying," Zora said, her voice growing shaky with anger. "You must be lying." "I'm not," Goran replied quietly. "I wish I were." The weight of his words crushed her. She had been led to believe that she was a part of something noble, something that could change the world. But now, it seemed, like everything had been a lie. The transformation, the research, the promises, it was all for one purpose: control. Zora took a step back, her mind spinning. What do you want from me, Goran? What do I do now? Goran's expression softened, and he stepped toward her. There's still time, Zora. There's a way out, but it won't be easy. You'll have to fight. I don't even know what I'm fighting for anymore, Zora whispered. How do I fight against something so massive? You don't fight them head-on, Goran said, his voice low and urgent. You fight them from the inside. You've been given the power to change things, to bring this organization down. But you'll need help. You'll need to find the others. Zora's heart skipped a beat. The others? Goran nodded. There are more of you. People who have undergone the same transformation, who are waking up to their abilities. They're scattered, hidden from the organization, but they're out there. If you can find them, you'll be able to stop what's coming. The weight of his words sank in, and for the first time, Zora felt a glimmer of hope. But that hope was tempered by the realization of how much she had to lose. Her entire existence had been manipulated, and now she was being thrust into a battle that she wasn't ready for. But it didn't matter. There was no turning back now. Where do I start? Zora asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions raging inside her. There's a safe house, Goran said. It's hidden in plain sight. You'll find the coordinates in your personal file, but be careful, there are eyes everywhere. The organization knows you're getting close to the truth, and they'll stop at nothing to keep you from it. Zora nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't going to let them control her anymore. She had been a pawn, but now she was ready to play the game. She just had to find the others, find the truth. With one last look at Goran, Zora turned and walked toward the door, determination in her every step. This was no longer just about survival. It was about taking back control. As Zora made her way out of the observation room, she could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her shoulders. The world had changed, and so had she. She was no longer just a woman caught in the middle of a scientific experiment. She was the key to stopping a powerful, shadowy organization. The fight had only just begun, but she had to be careful. The organization was everywhere, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Every step she took from here on out would be a risk, but it didn't matter. Zora knew what she had to do, and she wouldn't stop until she had uncovered the truth. Zora had never been more aware of the eyes on her. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every corner felt like it could harbor a trap. Her senses were heightened, her body constantly on edge, but that didn't stop the feeling of isolation that gnawed at her. Goran had warned her that the road ahead would be dangerous. He hadn't exaggerated. The coordinates Goran had given her led to an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was the kind of place that looked like it had been forgotten by time, its structure crumbling under the weight of years of neglect. Yet to Zora, it represented a flicker of hope in the midst of an overwhelming darkness. If Goran's words were true, then the others, the ones who had undergone the same transformation, were waiting for her inside. But Zora knew that getting there wouldn't be as simple as just walking in. The organization was everywhere. Their operatives blended seamlessly with society, and their surveillance was almost omnipresent. She had already noticed the subtle signs of being followed, the strangers who appeared out of nowhere, the vehicles that seemed to shadow her movements, the feeling that she was always being watched. Zora had grown accustomed to being cautious, but tonight everything felt different. Everything felt more urgent. The street was empty as Zora approached the warehouse, her boots making soft sounds against the cracked pavement. A cool breeze tugged at her jacket, but the chill in the air was nothing compared to the icy feeling that had settled deep inside her. She was close, too close maybe, but she had no choice. The truth was within her reach, and there was no turning back. She stepped through the broken door, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, but she could make out the outlines of crates and old equipment scattered around the space. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves, and cautiously moved deeper into the building. The air smelled stale, thick with dust and mildew, but there was something else in the air, something that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She wasn't alone. Before she could react, a figure stepped out from behind a stack of crates, their movement fluid and swift. Zora tensed, her hand instinctively reaching for the small weapon she'd managed to smuggle from the facility. But the figure raised their hands in a non-threatening gesture, a slight smirk playing on their lips. "You're the one Goran sent?" the figure asked, their voice low and smooth. It was a woman, tall, with dark, intense eyes that seemed to pierce through Zora. Zora narrowed her gaze, keeping her stance ready. "Who are you?" "The question is, who are you?" the woman replied, her expression turning serious. "Goran sent us a message. He said you were coming. You must be Zora." Zora didn't lower her guard. "What's this place?" The woman looked around the warehouse, her eyes scanning the shadows, as if making sure no one else was listening. "This is our safe house. Well, what's left of it. We've been moving around, staying hidden. The organization doesn't make it easy." Zora didn't need to ask who "we" were. She had heard about the other transformed individuals, the ones who, like her, had been part of the experiment, the ones who had gained extraordinary abilities, only to become pawns in a much larger game. "Where are they?" Zora asked, her voice low. She could feel her pulse quicken. "The others? The ones like me?" The woman smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. "They're here. But you should know, Zora, we're not all on the same side. Some of us want to fight back, others want to hide. Some—" She trailed off, her eyes narrowing, as if unsure how to continue. "Some of us are still struggling with what we've become." Zora swallowed hard. She wasn't sure if she was ready to hear the truth about what she had become. She'd been running from it, hoping that the strange powers within her would remain a mystery, but the reality of it all was crashing down on her now. The woman's expression softened. "But you're different. You're not like the rest of us. You've been through something else. You've awakened." Zora's mind raced. She had heard the term before, but it had always felt like something distant, something out of her control. But now it was here, in front of her, and it seemed to be tied to her transformation. "What does that mean?" she asked, the words heavy in her mouth. "It means you're more powerful than you realize," the woman said, her voice almost a whisper. "It means that whatever they did to you, it worked differently. You're stronger, faster, and more in control than anyone else." Zora felt the weight of her transformation pressing down on her again. The strange abilities she had discovered within herself, hearing whispers from far away, seeing things others couldn't, moving faster than the human eye could track, these weren't just coincidences. They were part of something much bigger, something that would make her the key to ending the organization's reign of control. "Are you saying I'm the one who can stop them?" Zora asked, disbelief mixing with a flicker of hope. The woman nodded. "You're the one they've been afraid of, and now you're the one who's going to bring them down." Zora's mind reeled. She wasn't sure if she was ready for that kind of responsibility. But she couldn't turn back now. She had to see this through. If there was any chance of saving herself and the others like her, she had to stop the organization before they could do any more damage. "We need to move," the woman said suddenly, her voice sharp. "We've got company." Zora's heart leaped into her throat as the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the entrance of the warehouse. The woman grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a narrow door hidden behind a stack of crates. "This way, quickly!" Zora followed without question, her instinct screaming at her to keep moving. She didn't know who was coming, but she knew they wouldn't hesitate to kill her if they had to. The organization had eyes everywhere, and if they had found her, it meant her time was running out. They ducked into the small room, and the woman, quickly locked the door behind them. The space was cramped, filled with crates and supplies, but Zora didn't have time to think about the surroundings. She was too focused on the sound of approaching footsteps, growing louder by the second. "Ah, they here?" Zora whispered, her breath shallow as she tried to listen for any indication of their location. "They're close," the woman replied. "Too close." Suddenly, the door burst open, and a group of armed men rushed in. Zora instinctively dropped into a combat stance, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. She had never fought before, but the changes inside her had made her more than capable. She wasn't the helpless woman she had once been. The woman beside her raised a hand, sending a shockwave of energy that slammed into the men, knocking them back. Zora could see the surprise in their eyes, but there was no time for hesitation. She lunged forward, moving with lightning speed, and disarmed one of the men, taking his weapon before he could react. She was already beyond him, darting into the next attacker, using her newfound strength to subdue him with a single precise strike. The room filled with the sound of chaos as the men scrambled to regain control, but Zora and the woman were already a step ahead. They were no longer just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the truth. Zora had never felt so alive. It was as if the universe itself was humming through her veins, every cell of her body charged with an energy she couldn't fully comprehend. She had come so far, through endless battles, lies, and betrayals, but now, standing on the precipice of the final confrontation, she knew one thing for certain. This was the moment when everything would change. The warehouse had become a battleground. The remaining members of the organization had found them, cornered them, and forced them into this final stand. But Zora wasn't afraid anymore. She had embraced the truth of what she was, and the power she wielded. She wasn't just a pawn. She wasn't just a victim. She was a force that could reshape everything, and they would learn that today. The woman, whose name Zora had learned was Lyra, stood beside her, both of them staring down the armed men who now surrounded them. The chaos from earlier had settled into a tense, heavy silence. The only sounds were the occasional scuffle of boots against the floor and the shallow breaths of those ready for the fight of their lives. Zora felt the power inside her stir, an untapped wellspring that she was now fully aware of. The transformation, the awakening, had given her the ability to sense things beyond the normal scope of human perception. The room seemed to pulse with energy, as if the walls themselves were alive with the collective tension of the coming storm. "Lyra," Zora said, her voice calm, though her heart raced. "Are we ready for this?" Lyra gave her a tight nod, though her eyes were shadowed with concern. "We don't have a choice. We've been running long enough. This ends tonight." Zora glanced at the others, those who had been transformed alongside her. Some were injured, some were exhausted, but they all shared the same determination. They were more than willing to fight, not just for survival, but for justice, for the right to exist as their true selves. The men in front of them weren't just operatives. They were the last of the organization's elite force, the ones sent to silence them. Zora could see the fear in their eyes despite their bravado. They had underestimated her, and that was their mistake. The silence was broken by the leader of the group, a man who had been with them since the beginning. His face was cold, calculating, and his voice echoed through the room like a death sentence. "You think you can stop us, Zora?" he sneered. "You're nothing. A freak, an experiment, just like the rest of them." Zora's blood boiled, but she kept her composure. This wasn't just about her, it was about everyone who had suffered at the hands of this faceless organization. She had learned the truth, their intentions, their plans, and now she had the power to put an end to it. "I'm not like them," she said, her voice steady, but with an edge that made the man flinch. "And I'm not going to let you do to anyone else what you did to me." The man chuckled darkly, stepping forward. "You can't stop what's coming. The experiment is too far along. You can't fight the system." His words hung in the air like a challenge, and Zora met his gaze without flinching. The system? You think I care about your system? Your system is built on lies, on pain, on control. I've seen what you've done, and I know the truth now. And that truth... She clenched her fists, feeling the power surge through her. It's going to destroy you. There was a pause, an instant of quiet, before the room erupted into action. Without warning, Lyra moved first, sending another shockwave of energy toward the nearest operative. The man was knocked off his feet, and in the same instant, Zora was already moving, her speed almost too fast for the eye to follow. She reached the leader in a blur, disarming him with a fluid motion that sent his weapon skidding across the floor. He didn't seem surprised by her abilities. In fact, there was something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition. You're more than we thought, he said, his voice tight with disbelief. You've unlocked your potential. Zora's lips curled into a grim smile. And I'm not stopping now. She moved again, but this time the leader was ready. He lunged, grabbing her arm and twisting it behind her back. Zora gritted her teeth as pain shot through her shoulder, but she refused to let it slow her down. Using her free hand, she slammed her palm into his chest, sending a blast of energy that threw him backward. The force of the impact was enough to knock him into a pile of crates. But he wasn't finished yet. He stood, more determined than ever. You think you can defeat us? You're just one person. Zora's heart beat in her ears as she looked around. The remaining operatives were closing in. They were skilled, relentless, but Zora had something they didn't. She had the truth on her side, and she had learned to wield her power with precision. Maybe, she said, breathing heavily, but it only takes one person to change everything. With a burst of strength, Zora leaped into the fray, moving faster than anyone could track. She disarmed one man, took down another, and then, with a swift motion, sent the last of the operatives crashing into the wall. It was over. The battle was won, but Zora knew the true fight had just begun. As she stood in the aftermath, the room still and silent, she felt a sudden sense of loss. The victory was bittersweet. The cost had been high, and the wounds ran deep. But it had been necessary. The organization was no more, its grip on the world broken, and in its place, a new beginning could emerge. Lyra approached her, her expression weary but satisfied. It's done, she said, her voice low. Zora nodded, her gaze shifting to the others. They were free. The nightmare had ended for them. But as she stood there, looking at the people she had come to care for, Zora knew there was more to this than just defeating the organization. There was a larger lesson to be learned here, a deeper truth about the world they lived in and about the power of individuals to change the course of history. The truth, Zora whispered, her voice distant, is that we are not just the sum of what they made us. We are more than experiments. We are human, and that's what will always give us the strength to fight back. The others gathered around her, their faces reflecting a mix of exhaustion and hope. For the first time, in a long while, Zora felt a sense of peace settle within her. The fight was over. But the journey, the real journey, was just beginning, the end. Zora's ultimate confrontation with the organization brings everything to a head with an emotional and action-packed finale. She has unlocked the full potential of her powers and now understands her role in the larger scheme of things. The story ends with the victory over the organization and a final thought-provoking lesson about self-determination, resilience, and the truth. The end.